All right, so let's talk about Jenkins. So now this what we've been talking about of automating this process. There's quite a few products that allow us to do this, right? But I would say that by far Jenkins is it's one of the leading tools that allows us to automate this process. So let's spend some time on this tool, and it's the one that we're asking you to use throughout. If you if you have an alternative, Heroku has its own continuous integration solution, and that certainly could have been an option. But Jenkins is pretty industry standard, and it's would be well versed to use what most folks use out there. So Jenkins is just it's a Java server, right? So it's just a Java server that can run as a web application, and it can automate a lot of the things that you would do manually. You can create shell scripts that can be executed right from Jenkins. So Jenkins can run shell scripts as if you were typing them at the command line, right? So if you're currently doing a Maven clean install, and then you are pushing your content to Heroku and whatnot, and you're running your tests, those shell commands that you are typing at the command line, they can be copied and pasted into Jenkins, right? And then have Jenkins do it for you, right? And so all this drudgery of you doing some things manually can be then delegated for Jenkins to do this automatically. Okay. I invite you to visit the Jenkins documentation. They have tons and tons of examples on how to use Jenkins, and I encourage you to take a look at that. You can run Jenkins locally. If you want to play around with this on your own, I can encourage you to play around with this. There's a download file. It's just a simple WAR file, and it'll download in your local machine, and it's called Jenkins.war. And you can run it for local from your machine. You just say java-jar Jenkins.war, and then you can tell it the port number that you want to use, and it'll run the Jenkins on that port. And you can navigate to localhost 8080 and start using it right away from your local machine. What we've done is that the school has given us a machine, and we have Jenkins running on that particular machine. Okay, but it's the same Jenkins you would have, if you were running it locally on your machine. There's no difference, right? Okay. All right. So let's talk about pipelines. So typically when we automate, there are usually some logical steps when we automate things. There are certainly well-defined steps. When we go from committing something to the source control all the way up to deploying this on Heroku or AWS or whatever. Right? So there's some very well logical steps. There's a step of compiling, and then there's the step of running the tests, and then there's the step of packaging it, right? And then there's the step of deploying this. So there's some basic steps that are very well defined, and these large steps are usually referred to as pipelines, right? Or jobs. They're very generic terms. That is a collection of all the logical things that you need to do to go from code all the way to deployment. Yes? And so the general term in Jenkins is a pipeline, right? Of all the things that need to happen in a particular sequence of steps to go from code all the way down to all the way to delivery. Okay? So here's an example of creating a pipeline. We'll create the simplest of pipelines. It's going to be a hello world pipeline. If you run Jenkins, on the left-hand side, you'll have this set of options, and you can create a new item. New items allows you to create all sorts of things, including pipelines. You can create a brand new pipeline. So if you click on new item, and then you can select the pipeline, and you can give the pipeline a name. So in this case, it's a hello world pipeline. And then click Save down at the bottom. once you've created the pipeline, you'll be in a pipeline definition screen, and somewhere in there, there'll be some text area where you can start typing, right? And what you can type in there is command lines that you would be able to run at the command line at the terminal. Things that you could actually type at the terminal. Here's something that you might type at the terminal: echo hello world. Right? If you type this at the terminal, the terminal will echo the string hello world. Yes. All right. So this is the simplest of pipelines, and we'll come back to this in a minute. That a pipeline is a collection of nodes, right? And nodes can be all sorts of types of nodes, but this is the most generic type of node. It's not any specific type of node, so that's why it's just node. And then the text that is going to be executed in the local operating system. So this has to be valid for your particular operating system, right? In this case, this is running on a Linux machine. Right, so it is valid on that particular operating system. What Jenkins is going to do is going to read this, and whenever you tell it, it's going to go and actually execute this pipeline, and it'll read all the commands, all the terminal commands, and we'll execute them, and it will capture what the terminal says, all the console output, and it's going to tell you, well, this is what happened. All right. So if you run that, and once you've entered that and you say save, on the left-hand side, the menu changes to this, where you can run the build right now. You can say build now, and when it builds, it goes on and you can see the console as it's running, and it's capturing the console inside of the web application, and it'll actually it'll log everything, and you will see when it echoes hello world actually being displayed on the console. It also keeps track of a history of every time this particular pipeline has been built, right, with a numeral. This is the very first time that this was ever run. Every time you run it, it becomes 2, 3, 4, 5. It just keeps track of the number of times, and you can click on any one of these, right, to see the history, the particular details of every single build that this has ever been run, and then you can say, well, that particular time that ran, what was the console output? And then you can see the console output of what actually was executed. Make sense? Right? So you can keep track of an audit trail on when any of these pipelines have been executed. Right? All right, leave it here.